all of those core symptoms of autism are made worse by not sleeping. All of my sleep treatments rely around 4 sort of main components.
Dr. Keira Moore. She is a pediatric and special needs sleep specialist.
I like to dabble in a lot of different things. So I do sleep work, teach in a graduate school program for behavior analysts. I am a dog trainer, and I used to be a flying trapeze instructor. During the night, we also go through these little microawakenings where our brain kind of turns back on for just a second and goes, okay, is everything okay here? Are we safe?
If you had one key takeaway that you want to leave with our audience today, what would it be?
My number one rule for good sleep is...
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Blissy Experience. I'm your host, Ariana. We are so happy to see you back. If you haven't had a chance yet, please like and subscribe to this podcast so that you can get more episodes. And it's really important for us to know that the community is loving it so that we can keep this podcast going. Most importantly, we are here to bring you tips, stories, and experts on how you can get your best sleep. Today's episode is going to be a really exciting conversation. I am so looking forward to this. This is with Dr. Keira Moore. She is a pediatric and special needs sleep specialist. She's been working in the field for 2 decades, filled with knowledge. I'm so excited to welcome you to Dr. Keira Moore. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So Keira, you have such an extensive background, of course, academically, but also in your experience working hands-on with families. I understand you work with people 2 and up. Is that right?
I do. I specialize in 2 and up. There's quite a market for baby sleep work, which is already saturated. There are a lot of people that specialize in baby sleep problems, but there are far fewer people that specialize in 2 and up, but there's still just as much of a need there.
Oh, I'm sure. So let's start kind of with your background personally. How did you discover that this was the path for you? I mean, you said that there is such a need, but how did you kind of stumble into this being your purpose?
That's a good question. I have always been a lover of sleep myself. I've always been somebody that requires a lot of sleep. And I've always been somebody that kind of worried about sleep, but never really knew how to make sure I was getting good sleep or how to take care of my sleep. And I started my career as a behavior analyst, specializing in working with kids on the autism spectrum. I kind of stumbled into a PhD program. That's a whole nother story. And
I feel like I've stumbled into many things in my life, but not yet a PhD program.
It was completely accidental, didn't want to be there initially, didn't mean to be there, and I somehow made it through, and they gave me a PhD at the end. Still not quite sure if I should have had it, but... In one of my classes with one of my mentors, Dr. Greg Hanley, this class was on teaching children with autism and dealing with severe problem behavior. And that's my other area of expertise. And so I was really excited for that class. And I'm flipping through the syllabus at the beginning of the semester, like any good student does. And I see that there's a whole week on sleep problems. And I thought, that's odd, because I had always thought sleep problems were medical problems, and I am not a medical doctor. Right. I'm a doctor in behavior analysis, so that's like a psychologist, basically.
Sure. So you're saying that you were seeing in a behavior-related class, you were looking at sleep. That's interesting.
And I was fascinated just seeing it on the syllabus, thinking, okay, what are we going to be doing? I didn't think sleep was something we could target as behavior analysts. I've never thought about it as behavior. Sure. Couldn't wait to get to that week of content. And when we did, I knew that's what I wanted to be doing.
Wow.
I didn't know that it was even possible before in my field to be treating behavior or to be treating sleep problems, because I didn't know it was behavior.
Sure.
And that was a really eye-opening course for me to realize, sleep is a behavior problem for most people, and it's something that we can apply our science of behavior analysis to and we can fix. And I kind of was off and running really quickly. My professor was running a sleep lab at the time, and where they were treating mostly kids with autism. And I said, hey, do you mind if I take some of the research that you're doing and apply it to some of my clients that have sleep problems? And of course they said, please do. We need more people doing this. And I had such good results right from the get-go. I knew that's what I needed to be doing. It's not often in my field that you get to see results happen that quickly. I'm often working with with children on the very severe end of the autism spectrum, where change takes time and behavior problems are hard to fix. And with sleep problems, I could come in, do an assessment, start treatment, and in 2 weeks see a huge difference, not just in sleep, but in behavior across the board and their well-being and the well-being of their families.
Wow. I mean, what an incredible experience to see that hands-on, to see that change take place. And you mentioned that not only did it impact their sleep positively, let's say those nighttime hours, but across the board. Tell me about that. How did they feel the difference in the daytime?
Yeah, so particularly for children with autism, sleep causes problems throughout their whole entire day. It's not just the nighttime being a struggle. All of those core symptoms of autism are made worse by not sleeping. So things like repetitive and ritualistic behavior gets worse when kids aren't sleeping. Learning slows down when kids aren't sleeping, and we're often dealing with learning challenges to begin with in that population. So we want to give them every benefit they can get when it comes to learning, and if they're not getting good sleep, they're not going to be learning at their best. Problem behavior that we see, like self-injury, aggression, tantrums, those all go up when sleep goes down. So really everything that I was working on during the day as a behavior analyst was made better when we could fix sleep problems at night. And then, of course, also health, just general well-being, the well-being of the whole family when everyone else can sleep as well.
Wow. I mean, it's incredible that in such a short amount of time, you're able to see such a difference. I think many of us who, let's just say, have struggled with sleep at any degree, there's sort of a resignation that happens. I know for me, I was kind of like, I just have always had a hard time sleeping. I remember being 7 years old probably and laying in bed, and I would just stare at the ceiling all night until I finally was like, okay, I can stand up now and go to school. I mean, I would just lay in bed all night. So there's this, like I said, a resignation that kind of takes place. So you're saying that even within a couple of weeks, people really can make changes that will truly impact their sleep?
Absolutely. And it's not just with children with autism. So that's kind of where I got started in doing sleep work, and that quickly expanded to other people hearing, oh, you can fix sleep problems. Right. Can you help my kid? My kid doesn't have autism. Can you still help them? Of course. It's all the same. We use all the same methods. And then, of course, that's expanded now to adults as well. So in my consulting, it used to be specialized to children with autism. And now I'm serving children with autism, neurotypical children, children with other disabilities, and adults. So I'm essentially anyone 2 and up. I'll take them and I'll help them with their sleep problems.
Wow. I love that you say on your website, it's one of the first things that you see on Dr. Keira Moore's website is that you're helping people take back their sleep. What does that mean? Yeah,
I think it's, like you said, a lot of people that struggle with sleep problems, they've struggled with sleep problems for a long time. Most of the time when I talk to parents and say, how long has your child been having sleep problems? It's not just days or weeks or months. It's since they were a baby.
Yeah.
Same with adults. When I talk to adults, how long have you had sleep problems? It's almost forever. Most people, that it's not just a new thing that's developed. They've always struggled with sleep. And like you said, I think a lot of people resign themselves to, I'm just not a good sleeper, or I just don't need as much sleep, or I can function how I am. And that's not true. Sleep is a behavior problem for most people. It's not. For some people, there are medical problems that need to be treated, but for most people, it's behavioral problems.
Wow.
And we can make some really simple changes that have a profound impact on sleep, and it's never too late to make those changes. I've worked with people in their 60s and 70s, which often we think sleep gets worse when you get older. It doesn't have to. We can do things to keep sleep healthy until you get the eternal sleep.
Wow, the eternal sleep, right? And I'm sure it is so individualized. Of course, I know you work one-on-one with your clients to personalize a plan for them, but can you give us some color, some examples of what types of behavioral changes are needed in order to get a better night's sleep? Yeah,
so the process is individualized, but all of my sleep treatments rely around 4 sort of main components. One is having a good bedtime routine, so the things that you do leading up to going to sleep. One is having a good sleep schedule, which this is the part people hate to hear. You need to stay on a consistent schedule, going to sleep at the same time every night, getting up at the same time every morning. And then one component is sleep dependencies. So making sure that you have good, healthy sleep dependencies that are consistent throughout the night. They're there every night. They stay the same every night.
And tell me what a sleep dependency is.
Yeah, that's a good question. Sleep dependencies are anything that a person needs to fall asleep and stay asleep. Most of us have sleep dependencies. Is there anything that you have with you or you need with you to fall asleep?
Yeah, I was already thinking through. I'm like, I typically sleep on my side. I have to be in that position, usually on my left side. And I usually am hugging a pillow in front of me to kind of keep my body a little bit more open. And if I don't have that position, I notice it's much harder.
Same. I have the same left side. I need to
Really?
be holding on to something. Same.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
same exact
We're
thing.
buddies.
Yeah. What about your environment? Is there anything about your sleep environment?
Yes, temperature I notice is a big one for
Yeah.
me. I used to struggle with really bad dreams for a long time. And I just thought, okay, apparently my brain is just sadistic and, hates, being asleep. And so then it has terrible dreams. But then I finally read something actually online, I think, that said that they had done some studies that linked the temperature of the room to bad dreams. And if it was too hot, your body kind of went into, I guess, like a flight or fight mode.
Yeah.
And so I tried lowering the temperature of the room, and all of a sudden I slept better, deeper,
Yeah.
longer, and the bad dreams went away.
Yep. Yeah. So even something like temperature can be a sleep dependency. Darkness is a sleep dependency for a lot of people. For a lot of people, another person is a sleep dependency.
Yeah.
I hate to admit it, but my partner, I don't want him to be a sleep dependency because it's never a good thing to have a sleep dependency on another person. But he was away last night and I did not sleep very good. And I
Really?
also let my dog sleep in the bed, which she's usually not allowed to. Also not a good sleep dependency of pet. But so a sleep dependency is anything that you need to fall asleep. And it can vary quite a bit from person to person. Everybody has them. Some of them are healthy and some of them are unhealthy. And we want
interesting.
people to have healthy ones because they actually help you sleep better. So I consider a healthy sleep dependency something that is with you every night. It's with you all night and it stays the same all night from the time you fall asleep until the time you wake up.
Yeah.
So, for example, a cat would not be a good sleep dependency because there is never a cat that stays right there with you by your side and doesn't
For all
move.
8 hours.
Yes,
Yeah.
never happens. Cats are never. Sometimes dogs. My dog actually is decent. She'll go under the covers and stay right next to me and she'll sleep all night.
Oh, okay.
But she'll move around and wake me up. But people are usually not going to meet all those criteria. So things like a stuffed animal, a special pillow, darkness, that can be a good sleep dependency. White noise, that can be a good sleep dependency. Things that are unhealthy sleep dependencies, phones, people that are falling asleep scrolling on TikTok. I've had clients before that literally fall asleep with their phone in their hand and the phone kind of falls out of their hand. And when they wake up, what's the first thing they do? They
Grab the
scramble around to
phone,
grab
yeah.
the phone and look at it again.
Oh, yeah.
Going to sleep with a TV on, if you put it on a sleep timer, that's an unhealthy sleep dependency. Anything that changes. So one of the biggest ones I see with kids is parents lay down to help the child fall asleep, maybe rub their
Oh.
back, and then once they're asleep, they tiptoe out of the room.
Oh, this is good to know. I just did this the other day with my niece.
Yeah,
she asked me to lay with her
don't
while
do
she
that.
fell asleep. Yeah. So you're
Because
saying
sure enough, they're going to wake up in the middle of the night, and what are they going to do? They're
'Cause you're
going to
gone.
tiptoe back out of that room and come find you because they
Yeah.
need you to fall back to sleep. And the reason that healthy sleep dependencies are so important is throughout the night, I think most people understand we go through different sleep cycles throughout the night. We go back and forth between REM sleep and non-REM sleep. And I am not a medical doctor. I'm not a neuroscientist. So getting into all the details of that is beyond the scope of what I do. But during the night, we also go through these little micro-awakenings where our brain kind of turns back on for just a second and goes, okay, is everything okay here? Are we safe?
Sure. Kind of
that's
assesses, the environment.
Yep, and that's a pretty normal part of a sleep pattern for most adults and most children, where the brain kind of just clicks on for a second and goes, are we good here?
Yeah.
And if you think about it, that's a good advantage to have. If our brain just shut off for 8 hours and was completely oblivious to the world,
Yeah.
that would not be good for us.
Oh, it totally makes sense from a survival standpoint.
Yeah.
You'd want to just kind of, for a second, am I hearing any tigers approaching? Yeah, it's
Is my
a
house
smart
on
idea.
fire? Yeah, you
Yeah.
need to know. But if anything in your environment has changed from the time that you fell asleep initially to when you wake up or when that brain kind of clicks on, that sounds the alarm bells, and that tells your brain like something's changed, wake up.
Right.
And that leads to a full-blown waking. So if you're a good, healthy sleeper and you've got good sleep dependencies that stay the same all night, usually those little micro-awakenings, you won't even remember them. You might roll over and change positions, go back to sleep, but you won't remember it in the morning because it was so quick. Right. Whereas if you're a little kid and you fell asleep and mom was there rubbing your back, and then you wake up a few hours later, brain turns on and goes, are we okay? Oh my God, we're not okay. Mom's not here anymore. I got to wake up and I got to go find mom.
Yeah, something has changed.
Yeah, so having good sleep dependencies is a really important part of good sleep.
Yeah.
So our fourth thing that we look at in treating sleep problems is interfering behavior. And that's a pretty broad category. But that can be any behavior that you are engaging in when you should be sleeping other than sleeping. And that can include both when you're supposed to be falling asleep and in the middle of the night. So I bet you can probably guess what the number one interfering behavior is for adults. What would your
cell phones?
Yep. Cell phones and other electronics. Put them away.
Yeah.
Put them away at night. I always tell clients, whether they're adults or children, my number one rule for good sleep is when you are going to bed, your electronics also need to go in their own bed. Not in your bed, not plugged in right next to your bed where you can reach it, but out of reach and not in your bed. You shouldn't be laying in your bed scrolling on your phone, because that is the number one way to ruin your sleep. And same for kids.
Wow. Same for kids. And in the morning, I've also heard that it's not good for the brain, the waking. I know you focus mostly on sleep, but what are your thoughts on how long someone should potentially wait, before grabbing their phone in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, it's less likely to ruin your sleep if you're hopping on your phone in the morning. I am guilty of that myself. When I wake up, the first thing I do is reach for my phone and start checking email and getting right into the day. Generally not recommended in terms of stress and mental health. If you can, keep your electronics off and keep them away as long as you can. Take time in the morning to do your own thing and have some time and space, especially for people who struggle falling asleep, that struggle to turn their brain off. That's the most common complaint that I hear from adults. I can't fall asleep because I can't turn my brain off. And I think that's due to us living in this world of constant engagement and often engagement in different directions. So it's not just that we're constantly scrolling on our phone. We might be scrolling on our phone while talking to somebody, while listening to TV or listening to a podcast. I'm guilty of that. I have said before, I have a brain that can work in 10 different directions at once, which I'm grateful for, but it also makes it really hard for me to not have all that stimulation. So I'm somebody that has struggled with that in the past, where if I'm laying down at night and suddenly all of that's gone, and now I'm in a dark room with white noise and there's no stimulation and there's nothing to do, my brain is now thinking about 100 different things full speed ahead. Like, what do we have to do tomorrow? What happened today? Did I say a weird thing to that person when I passed them in the hallway?
That's always what it is for me.
And then I'm kind of just spiraling in all these different directions. And learning how to actually stop that and how to just quiet your brain and how to take that control back and be able to just relax is a really big skill for people. And that's not anything magical or mystical. That's a skill. It's like learning how to ride a bike. You can learn how to quiet your brain and lay still and relax.
Let's talk about that skill you're just mentioning. The word meditation comes to mind, but I would imagine it doesn't have to be called meditation per se. And I know some people might be more drawn to things like yoga and meditation. Some people might just want a better night's sleep. They just want to turn their brain off. How do you typically approach learning that skill of quieting the mind?
Yeah, I think that varies for everybody, what their preference is of how they want to do it. But I recommend either meditation or learning simple breathing exercises where you can focus on just one thing. But the important thing is, don't just go, okay, I'm going to start meditating and I'm going to do it when I get in bed at night. I'm going to turn on whatever meditation app, or I'm going to practice whatever meditation technique I learned online. That's the highest stakes time to do it, which means that's not where you're going to learn this skill. So first, I always tell people, practice during the day. Learn how to do that during the day under lower stakes conditions. So when you have a few minutes that you can relax, that you don't have your kids banging on your door, your dog needing to go out for a walk, or dinner needs to be made, or emails you need to answer, when you have a couple minutes that you can set aside to just relax, practice and pick one specific easy thing first. So for me, I like to start with box breathing for people. That's a really good one that people can learn quickly, where you just learn how to breathe in counts of 4. You breathe in for 4, you hold it for 4, breathe out for 4, hold it for 4. And if you're really focusing on that, and you can, if other thoughts start coming in, that's okay. You have it. It's a skill that you have to practice, being able to just focus. And you start in really little small increments. Do it for 10 seconds. If you can do it for 10 seconds, successfully do that a few more times and then start building it up. When you can do that during the day successfully, then you can start practicing it at night. So it's, again, like riding a bike. You've got to learn it on a nice flat road first before you go mountain biking, right?
Right.
So before you can turn off those thoughts at night, practice during the day. But that's a really important one for adults and for kids too, that struggle with that bedtime anxiety and racing thoughts.
Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning the anxiety and the high stakes nature of going to sleep. I noticed that oftentimes my worst sleep as an adult is when I know that I have to wake up early in the morning for something really important tomorrow. So this is the most important night for me to get a good night's sleep, and I'm in bed. I'm like, I could be falling asleep, but now I'm like so anxious about waking up on time in the morning that then, I mean, ironically, it takes me hours longer to fall asleep. So I really appreciate that idea of learn when the stakes are low, so that then you can employ that when the stakes are higher.
And to your point, those mornings when you have to get up early and you're stressing about going to bed and I've got to get to sleep, the one thing people tend to do is go, okay, I'm going to go to sleep earlier because I have to get up earlier and I got to get my 8 hours. If you've got something like an early morning flight or like some weird schedule thing that's going to force you to get up earlier than you normally would, don't try to go to bed earlier.
Really?
You are going to drive yourself crazy. You're not going to fall asleep. And then you're going to get yourself more worked up and you're probably going to end up actually falling asleep later. So stick with your regular bedtime. You're going to lose a little bit of sleep that day if you have to get up early, but better than trying to shift your whole sleep schedule. So what happens, most people are familiar with the term circadian rhythm and that we kind of have this rhythm of alertness that we go through during the day. And what happens with that is we start in the morning at a low level of alertness and we slowly climb throughout the day. Some of us slower than others. I happen to be a person that takes a long time to get going in the morning, not a morning person. Some people wake up and they're up here already ready to go. So we kind of climb, our alertness climbs until about lunchtime. And then after lunch, we get that little mid-afternoon dip in alertness. Everybody knows about that, the post-lunch
I know very well about that.
Yeah, luckily I didn't eat lunch yet today, so I'm not there yet. I don't know about the rest of you. But we have that little dip in alertness midday, and then our alertness climbs again. And we actually reach the peak of alertness about an hour or two before our normal bedtime. Now, if you don't have a normal schedule, your circadian rhythm's going to kind of be all over the place. But if you keep a regular schedule or semi-regular schedule, about an hour or two before you go to bed, you're going to be at your peak of alertness for the day. We call that the forbidden zone, meaning don't try to go to sleep then because your body physically is not going to be able to fall asleep.
Sure.
So if you have, let's say you've got a 5 a.m. flight and you're like, oh, I got to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm just going to go to bed a couple hours earlier. Don't bother. You're not going to fall asleep. It'll make everything worse.
And like you said, I would imagine, because I've tried that before, and I end up just getting frustrated because I'm like, well, I laid in bed 2 hours early, and so now I'm not falling asleep. So now I'm frustrated, which is AKA now leading to anxiety. And then, of course, it takes you longer.
Yeah, you're better off sticking with your regular routine, stick with your regular bedtime. You're going to lose a little bit of sleep, but if you can, sneak in a nap later in the day and then get back on your regular schedule as quickly as you can. And that's part of why maintaining a regular schedule is really important.
Yeah. If you are just as fascinated by this conversation as I am, be sure to like this episode and subscribe to the show. And also consider sharing this episode with someone in your life that could use better sleep, whether it's someone that you know personally or their kids. Just keep in mind that sleep is the greatest gift that we can share with anyone. And speaking of sharing that gift, consider Blissy for your gifting season coming up. This makes a great gift. It makes a great stocking stuffer. It comes in so many different colors, great for men, women. There are even sizes for kids. So be sure to just spread the love and enjoy your own Blissy as well. Keira, I have to ask your opinion about something kind of random, but you were mentioning that we wake up kind of gradually in the first half of the day. Then, of course, there's that afternoon dip. And then the peak actually happens in the evening, which I think a lot of us really feel. Mm-hmm. What's your opinion on the way that our society is structured in terms of school and work hours?
I love that question because it's structured in a way that does not fit me,
me
as a night owl. Yeah.
I shouldn't be here right now.
Yeah. So first, I want to say that is a legitimate thing, a night owl versus an early bird. That's called a chronotype. Mm. And there are actually, I think now they've said there's 5 distinct chronotypes. Again, that's not my area of expertise, but that is genetically determined. And if anybody's ever done any of those fun genetic tests that you can do on yourself, some of them actually look at your chronotype and they can predict whether you are an early riser or a night owl. I happen to be a night owl. Mm-hmm. I always have been. Same. For as long as I can remember. I've struggled with falling asleep. I've struggled with getting up in the morning. I'm very grouchy in the morning. My significant other can attest to that. There's a don't talk to Keira before she's been awake for an hour and had her coffee. Uh-huh. And that's a very real thing. That's a genetically determined thing. And some people are more on one extreme than the other. Some people kind of lie in the middle. Mm-hmm. But yeah, our society is really set up for those early birds, right? We make kids get up pretty early for school. Mm-hmm. People have to work. Our most typical schedule tends to be an 8 to 4 or a 9 to 5 schedule, which even if you're on a 9 to 5 schedule, for a lot of people, that means you're up at 6 a.m. to do the things you need to do and get to work on time. Mm-hmm. For me, there's no getting up at 6 a.m. and doing anything and being productive. And that's one of the reasons that I actually went in the direction I went with my work. I had been working at a traditional 9 to 5, it was actually 8 to 4 job. Mm-hmm. And I was not sleeping because I was having to be up at 6 o'clock every morning to get to work on time. I was also in school in the evening. I was also teaching flying trapeze in the evening, and I was often working.
No big deal. By the way, just throw that in there. Story. I was teaching flying trapeze at the time. We'll get into that later.
That's a whole different tangent. And so I was working often really late into the evening. I'd come home. I'd have to try and wind myself down quick and get to sleep. But that ultimately led to me sleeping sometimes 5 hours a night and then going into a really intense job, working all day, being really busy, being in school, and then rinse and repeat, do it again, and then try to catch up on on the weekends, which just wasn't happening for me. Yeah. And that's the case for a lot of people. There's this constant fight of what your body wants to do and then what you need to do for work or school or just to sort of fit in this society. I think now in our kind of digital age and post-COVID, I think there's a lot more flexibility in a lot of workplaces with more people working remotely now and more people wanting more flexible schedules and hours. So I think that's great because I think that's what we need, is to recognize that actually about half of our population, this schedule that we often demand doesn't work for them biologically and causes pretty serious health issues, because those people, they're not just being lazy, they're not just being I don't know how you would even describe it, staying up too late and partying at night and then not thinking about the repercussions. They physically cannot fall asleep earlier. Their body just isn't designed to do that in that way. And there are certain things you can do to encourage your circadian rhythm to kind of move backwards so that you can fall asleep earlier. But it's hard, and you're going to keep on running up against that biological pressure that your body doesn't want to be on that schedule. For me, I actually grew up on the East Coast, and I lived on the East Coast until I was 35-ish, I think, and then moved out here to the West Coast where we're 3 hours behind. And that actually made a really big difference for me, where I settled into a little bit more of a normal sleep schedule. On the East Coast, I was often, it would be midnight or later that my body was wanting to go to sleep.
Wow.
Now here I've adapted to the sleep schedule, but I'm still a little bit more on the early side now, like 11 o'clock, I'll be tired and ready to go to sleep.
Wow.
So I know that's not an option for most people to say, just relocate to a different time zone and quit your job and work from home and then you'll be fine. But anytime you can make accommodations for employees or students or yourself where you can make your schedule fit what your body wants to do, that's always a really good thing for your body. And when it's not possible, there's a couple things you can do to encourage your circadian rhythm sort of backwards. One is stay on a consistent sleep schedule, even on the weekends. So whatever time you get up on weekdays, unfortunately, get up on that time on weekends as well. Go to bed at the same time. Eat a big breakfast in the morning. For me, and I think for a lot of other night owls, eating in the morning is really hard. Your body's just not ready to go. It doesn't want to be functioning yet. But if you can eat and exercise and most importantly get sunlight in the morning, that can help start shifting your circadian rhythm a little bit. And then darkness at night. So if you're a night owl and you're having to push your schedule earlier, if you can dim your house lights after dinner, eat your dinner as early as you can, turn off all the extra lights, turn off your electronics before bed, at least an hour before bed. Put the phone away, turn off the TV, do something else that's quiet. You could read, you could do some yoga, you could meditate, you could journal, you could do a puzzle. There's a lot of options. It's hard for people to think of them sometimes, but they exist. And that can help shift your circadian rhythm back a little bit. But you are always going to kind of fight that pressure of what your body wants to do.
Sure. Well, the advent of electricity, I think, is such a key player here that not too long ago, maybe you had a candle, or a fire burning in your home, but now it could be this bright. For all we know, we're filming this at 3 a.m. You don't know. I mean, there's no windows in here. And I've noticed that makes a huge impact for me, that if I have all of the lights on, if you're looking at your screens a lot, that our brains biologically probably think, oh, it's bright daylight right now.
Exactly.
The best sleep that I ever had when I was in college in the summers, I worked for a wilderness program where we would take people out camping for weeks at a time. It was so fun. And that was some of the best sleep that I've ever gotten, because when the sun went down, my body started preparing for sleep. And in the wintertime, sometimes I would also go out and guide in the wintertime. And I mean, the sun starts to go down at 6 p.m. and my body would also start to kind of slow down, shut down. We would sleep longer hours in the wintertime because the night is longer. And then when the sun starts to rise, my body was like, okay, let's do this. Good morning.
Doing what your body was meant to do.
What we're meant to do. Exactly. And it is fascinating to me that, even having had that hands-on experience personally for several years in a row, I kind of forget to take advantage of that learning, that if you just dim the lights, you're going to get sleepier, because my big thing is, I just don't feel sleepy yet. I can't go to sleep. I'm not tired, but I know that I would feel more tired if I turned down the lights.
Yeah. And one thing, people talk about melatonin a lot, and there's this sort of misconception about how to use melatonin, if you're taking over-the-counter melatonin, and what it even is. And melatonin is a hormone that's produced in your brain, and it starts being produced because of darkness. So your brain naturally knows when the sun goes down to start making melatonin.
Wow.
But your brain can get tricked really easily by light. Artificial light will trick your brain into thinking, okay, sun's still up.
It's
gotta stay awake, still daytime, and your brain won't produce melatonin.
Wow.
Blue light is especially bad. So the light that comes from electronics. A lot of people have heard of blue light blockers or blue light glasses, but really any light will do that. So your brain is going, still daytime, still daytime.
Right.
It might be midnight and the sun's been down for 6 hours and you're shining light in your eyes and your brain's going, okay, still daytime, stay awake,
not
don't
only
produce
do I not
melatonin.
need to produce melatonin yet, but I should be producing all the things that keep me awake, right?
And if you're taking over-the-counter melatonin and still sitting in light or staring at your phone or watching TV, you might as well not be taking that melatonin. It's not going to do anything without the combination of darkness. Your brain is going to go disregard that.
Wow.
I don't need that right now.
Wow.
So if you are using melatonin, which I don't usually advocate for treatment of sleep problems. It's not a good long-term solution for most people. It has to be used in combination with darkness. It needs to be used about 45 minutes before bed, and you need to also dim lights, get rid of electronics. Don't be staring at screens. Don't be... The worst is when you're holding a screen right in front of your face and shining the light directly into your face.
Have you found any research that suggests that using melatonin in a light circumstance can actually be counterproductive? Like, I would imagine your brain eventually learns, oh, well, I'm going to ignore melatonin because I have learned that it doesn't mean we're going to go to sleep.
Yeah. It's interesting because overall the research on melatonin is not very promising. Even when used in the best case scenarios, it's not very promising. There's a very small change in what it actually does to sleep, and it's usually just in that initial part of making people drowsy. It doesn't help sustain sleep.
Really?
There's also very limited research on use in children, which is a bit scary given how many kids are taking melatonin and how many products are designed for kids. And the biggest thing for me that is problematic about melatonin is it is not regulated in the same way that medication is regulated. Because it's sold like a vitamin. So you don't really know what you're getting in any particular bottle. And there have been some studies that have shown that even within the same brands, what might be marketed as a bottle of 5 milligrams of melatonin, if you pull a bottle from one lot from that brand and then a bottle from a different lot from that same brand, you could be getting wildly different products.
Really?
They can be sometimes very little melatonin. It can be sometimes a lot of melatonin. There can sometimes be other things in there that aren't listed on the label. So it's a bit of a scary, you don't quite know what you're getting and you don't quite know if it's going to work. So,
and the fact that it's a hormone, I remember when I heard for the first time really, and I felt like maybe I was ignorant before this, but I always thought that melatonin was more like a vitamin supplement. And then I heard that it was a hormone. And, to put that in perspective, you kind of think about going to Rite Aid and seeing on the shelf that you could just buy estrogen or testosterone in gummy form. That'd be a little...
And give it to your kids.
And give it to your children. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And interestingly, there's been a big rise in melatonin overdose with kids because now it's being marketed as candies and gummies. And we all know anything that gets marketed like that, if kids get their hands on it, they're going to eat the whole bottle. They don't know.
Right.
So there's some dangers. People ask me about melatonin all the time. I tell them I'm not that kind of doctor. I can't tell you, I can't give you advice on taking medications. But as a sleep scientist, it's not something that I recommend in treatment. It's not ever something I'd write into a treatment plan for somebody that they should use melatonin. I've never had cases where it's been helpful or where it's made a difference. There's a lot more bang for your buck that you can get from behavioral treatment.
Wow. You mentioned that especially in an autistic population, there is such a difference when they're getting better sleep and how that translates into their daytime behaviors and just their quality of life overall. Let's talk about maybe people who are neurotypical. Many of our viewers are watching and maybe struggle with sleep a little bit. Maybe you know that you're supposed to put your phone away, but you don't. I'm very much with you in that. Can you give us some really tangible benefits of going through maybe some of those 4 steps that you were talking about to ensure that we are getting better sleep? I think we know we should be doing that, but really, what kind of practical benefits have you seen and the positive changes in people's lives when they actually finally do it?
Yeah. There's a lot of research on sleep and health and how sleep contributes to everything from obesity to heart disease to diabetes to stress and depression and anxiety. You name it, you name a health issue, it's been linked to sleep. So it's
a good way to put
everything. So there's all the health benefits, there's all the mental health benefits. And then there's just little things like performance. Like when you test somebody in a sleep lab who is sleep deprived versus well rested, little things like reaction time and memory and mood all vary with sleep. So if you want to be at your best, physically, mentally, emotionally, you have to sleep. And you have to sleep well, and you have to sleep enough. And most adults don't sleep enough. And I think people generally understand 8 hours is kind of the magic number. There's a bit of variance there. So for a typical healthy adult, you need anywhere between 7 and 9 hours. And some people are going to be closer to the 7 hour a night. And they're going to be fine. They're going to be at their best, healthy, emotionally, physically, mentally. Some people like me are closer to the 9 hours. If I'm not getting at least 8.5, I'm not at my best. I do even better around 9. If I sleep more than 9, not great.
Sure.
I don't need quite that much. But everybody falls somewhere within that 7 to 9. And I often hear people saying, well, I only sleep 5 hours a night, or I only sleep 6 hours a night, and I'm fine. And the reality of that is you think you're fine, but you're not. And there's actually some really cool studies where they take people and they put them in a sleep lab and they have them sleep whatever, I think usually 8 hours is the average for a week. And they run a battery of tests. They do reaction time tests, memory tests, problem solving, all kinds of different things. And they get their results when they're well rested. And they also ask them to rate their performance on all those different tests. So they don't see the results, but they say, like, how do you think you did?
Yeah.
And then they do all this same stuff, but with sleep deprivation. So they only let them
6 hours.
Yeah, they only let them get 5 or 6 hours for a couple nights in a row. They run the same tests, and then they ask, how do you think you did? And guess what? People rate themselves very highly when they are sleep deprived, even though their performance is very low. And they don't see it. They don't detect the difference.
But in some ways that makes sense, right? Because their ability to assess their own performance is also probably lowered.
Yeah. So if you're sitting at home and you're thinking, I sleep 6 hours a night and I'm fine, you could be better. You just don't know.
It's
you just
a lie.
don't know. Yeah, it's a lie your body is telling you. So I always tell people that because that happens all the time where people say like, oh, I only need 6 hours. My mom included. If my mom's watching this,
Mom, listen up.
She thinks she needs less than the average person, but everybody needs somewhere between 7 and 9.
Wow. So those people who, let's just say, naturally wake up after 5 or 6 hours, because there are people in my life that feel that way as well. Are you saying that there is just one of those 4 steps that you were talking about earlier that maybe is missing from their sleep and that they would actually sleep longer?
Yeah, there's typically what we talk about as poor sleep hygiene that is causing some disruption that's making them sleep less than they should.
Got it.
And that can be from a combination of any of those 4 things. So those 4 things that we focus on in sleep treatment, we often do all of those things together. It's not an issue of like, oh, you just need a better bedtime routine. It's usually you need a better bedtime routine and schedule, and let's look at your sleep dependencies, and let's look at your sleep environment, and
your
what kind of interfering behavior.
I would imagine caffeine consumption, all those things count under interferences. Is that right?
Yeah. And those things all, caffeine affects sleep, any substances at all, caffeine, alcohol, cannabis, those all affect sleep, not in a good way.
Sure. Wow. I mean, just the fact that there are so many little things in our life that, we can look at in our own life, that of course it's amazing to be able to work with a professional, a specialist such as yourself, but for our viewers at home to be able to take some of these tips and be able to start implementing them, it is amazing how much of a difference we really can make in our lives. And I've noticed that, I'm also a night owl, and so I notice when I have done the sleep hygiene thing and going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time, every day, I've noticed such a difference. Have you noticed that anyone has come to you as a client, say for their child, but then through their learnings as a parent that they have started to make changes?
Oh, all the time. Because when we go through a sleep treatment plan and I explain the rationale behind the things that we're doing, I don't ever just give people a plan and say, just trust me, it'll work, go do it. I always try to explain why I'm telling you to do all these things. Hopefully you'll be more likely to stick to it if you know the why. But parents are there's always little light bulb moments where they're like, oh, I should do that too, huh? And I'm like, yep. You should also have a consistent schedule. You should also have a good bedtime routine. That's one that I find a lot of adults think that only applies to kids. Kids need to have a bedtime routine, but like, I'm an adult. I don't need a routine. I do what I want.
That is such a great point. I have nieces and nephews, so my siblings have kids, and you do hear a lot about kids need a nighttime routine. And I've never actually put it together that, of course, we're all just big kids. Mm-hmm. And, of course, why would we not need a nighttime routine?
Yeah, and it comes down to, it helps your body prepare for sleep. It helps your brain prepare for sleep. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be like the way we would do it for a kid, where we might have like a visual schedule and stickers for completing different nighttime activities. You don't need to do that for an adult. And you don't need a complex routine. If you have even a series of a couple of events that you do in the same way every night right before you go to bed, that will help your body actually prepare for sleep and start to fall asleep quicker. So for me, I have a very predictable end of the night of, like, I go to the bathroom, I brush my teeth, I wash my hands, I get my dog out to go potty, I go get her a bedtime cookie. She has a little routine at night too. I tuck her into her little bed, she gets her little cookie.
It sounds like she sleeps probably better than a lot of us.
She is a great sleeper. I turn on my white noise, I turn off all the lights, I get my bed ready. By the time I'm getting into bed, I'm already falling asleep.
Wow.
Because it's just a little chain of behavior that I've set up where my body knows, okay, we do this, and then sleep. My body's already a step ahead now. So by the time I get in bed, my head hits the pillow and I'm out really fast.
Wow. So well trained, really. You know, the fact that you are somebody who has struggled with sleep in the past and that you're falling asleep at that point is amazing. Speaking of training, before we go, I want to ask, I know that you have some, just, again, such an amazing skill set, such an amazing background, eclectic. So I do want to ask a little bit about, you mentioned flying trapeze, but then also your dog is a very impressive certified actress, also a champion. Tell me a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes.
My dog, Frida Paulo, is her name.
P-A-W,
yes, P-A-W-L-O, yes. She came from Mexico. She has her own Instagram. She's a certified trick dog champion, and she's also a certified animal actress. And so I'm a behavior analyst, which applies to all behavior, human behavior and animal behavior. And when I got a dog, I was, of course, really interested in dog training and clicker training in particular. And I ended up recently getting my dog training certification. So I thought I'd add a couple more letters to my name.
Why not?
And I figured if I can change behavior of humans, I can change behavior of dogs too.
Sure.
And I've learned so much from training her that has applied to my work with humans, interestingly enough.
Really?
Yeah. So she's great. She's also a great sleeper. She also sleeps with white noise, and if I ever need her to settle down and take a nap during the day, I can just turn on my white noise app and she is out.
Wow.
So all the things that I've said about sleep apply to dogs too, it turns out.
Wow.
So yeah, that's one of my... I like to dabble in a lot of different things. So I do sleep work. I teach in a graduate school program for behavior analysts. I am a dog trainer. And I used to be a flying trapeze instructor. I have not been doing that recently because of a shoulder injury and getting a little too old to put my body through that. But behavior analysis applies there as well. You can teach humans to do flying trapeze with behavior analysis.
Right. Wow. Well, if you had one key takeaway that you want to leave with our audience today, what would it be?
Put your phones away at night, I think is the most important one. Put the phone away. Make a little bed for it if you have to. Tuck it in at night and get it away from your bed.
Wow. I mean, we've all heard it so many times, but even several of the experts that we've had on this show, actually, I think that has been their number one tip, has been to put the phone away. So hopefully one of these days we'll actually start listening. And where can people find you online?
They can find me at moorebehaviorconsulting.com. That's MOORE. Behavior Consulting. You can spell that yourself, .com. I also have a Facebook page, More Behavior Consulting is the name of that as well.
And are you taking new clients?
I'm always taking new clients. You can contact me on my website. Right now I have a little bit of a waiting list, but usually things kind of quiet down around the holiday season. So if you are looking for sleep help, now is a good time to get in and contact me.
Well, this has been such a fascinating conversation. I have taken so many mental notes. I can't wait to implement them. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. This has been Dr. Keira Moore teaching us so many awesome things about not only how to get better sleep, but even how to maybe share better sleep with those in our life who are neurotypical as well as neurodivergent. Please consider sharing this episode with people in your life. There are so many people around us that could be living a much better life if they just got a little bit better sleep at night. And speaking of sharing the love, also consider gifting a Blissy silk pillowcase, an eye mask, or a robe to someone in your life. They make great gifts. And also be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast today. We're so grateful that you spent this time here with us. I'm your host, Ariana, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Blissy Experience.